Hello. We call to order the Board of Finance at 5:04 p.m. on December 18th. And the first item on the agenda is the agenda. And I would welcome my motion to adopt or to amend it.
I already moved to adopt the agenda.
Excellent, thank you. So Councilor McGee, second by Councilor Barlow. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. That brings us to the public forum. Is there any member of the public? Actually, is there anyone who is seeking to address the Board of Finance in person here? Seeing none online.
Yes, we have one online and I am allowing you to talk. And just unmute yourself.
Yes, it's Sharon Busher. I somehow or other, my name isn't associated anymore with this. I'm not quite sure, but
Your initials are Sharon, but it looks like you're, are you going by Galaxy these days?
yes, I am. Yes, thank you. I like that name. Yes. Anyways, Mr. Mayor. So, I wanted to just let you know that 2 items on your consent agenda. I actually reached out to Director Pine about, they had to do with the 2 properties, the food shelf, and then there's another property that had a loan that is retiring, and I was concerned about those properties, the city not wanting to maintain them, but Director Pine was very helpful in letting me know about the covenants that are in place to ensure that whether they're used as their current activities or whether they get to be used in another way, there are covenants that ensure that they're going to be used for the greater good of the public, which I feel very good about. And then I wasn't quite sure about when BCDC would vote on this, and he told me that that action would be taken in January. So my concerns are resolved, but I always like to watchdog properties that the city owns, and I always think twice before, well, I always weigh in, as you know, Mr. Mayor, but I always think twice about how I feel about the sale or the loss of those properties, but this seems to be the right approach. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Great, thank you very much, Sharon. Not seeing any other online individuals looking to speak to the Board of Finance. I'm going to close the public forum and move to the consent agenda. Are we ready to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated? Thank you, Councilor Jang, second by President Paul. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have adopted the consent agenda. Okay. This brings us to the deliberative section of the agenda for approval and recommendation of the City Council. We have 9 items we're hoping to get through with some time remaining for us to discuss the when do we need to out of here?
It's be upstairs at 6 and we have our budget presentation. Let's try and start that by about 5:35.
All right, so that's the hope. Fellow board members. First item is a resolution for up to $345,000 step 2 loan for the Vermont Drinking Water State Revolving Fund for final design of reservoir improvements. Welcome,
Ask a question.
Megan. Yes.
Is there a reason why we can't discuss 4.1 and 4.2 at the same time?
I was gonna ask that too.
In 3.
3 and 3?
4.1 for we can try to go through all, they are separate items, but yes.
But all of us in the way, I think that could make sense.
Or at least 4.1 and 4.2?
I mean, I will go quickly. So 4.1 is for the drinking water reservoir project. We were able to use ARPA funds to fund the first phase. We are now trying to move to final design. This is a very critical facility. It serves the ships water from the water distribution system up to the elevated tanks, which is responsible for the water pressure on the hill and for the Vermont Medical Center. We need to move to final design so that we can get tight cost estimates to be able to bring to the voters for what this investment is going to cost in the future. Any questions on that? Okay, I can go to the next one.
Sure, why don't we do it that way?
The other one is also for to support the drinking water system. In part because of new regulations, but also because we need to update our existing system of maps. The water division had a cartographer, a mapper that was in place, actual staff up through, I think, the 1980s, 1990s, and that was let go of it sometimes. And so we are in need of updating of these service line records. Fundamentally, this is to make sure that we do not have any lead service lines within the city. We do not believe we do, but we need to make sure. And if we find any, they will be replaced. So that is a separate loan for planning level dollars from the drinking water SRF. So those are both from the drinking water state revolving fund. Would need to be repaid, but are at 0% interest at this time. The last one is a wastewater one, which I can certainly go over.
Why don't we deal with the two water?
Okay.
Are we have questions on either first two items? And if not, maybe someone can make a motion that captures both items. That's what we need.
I'm happy to move both 4.1 and 4.2 and take the actions as recommended.
Great, thank you, Councilor McGee. Second by Councilor Barlow. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll give a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And so, yes, Megan, take away number 3.
Okay, the last one is for our sewer pump stations. These are pumps that are in the lower levels of the city. So South Cove, Apple Tree Point, any of the places where we can't get sewage to drain from people's homes by gravity to the wastewater treatment plant. And so they drain by gravity to a smaller pump, which then pumps it up to a section of the gravity sewer. We have 25 of these, and we've identified a number of them that are at high risk due to age and or proximity to the lake. We've tackled 2 of them, Flynn and Fletcher, and we're picking off the ones that we can do in-house. But there are some remaining ones, 3 of which we'd like to advance for final design to get those better cost estimates so that they could be rolled into future asks for construction funding. And those are Crescent Beach Pump Station, the Proctor Place Pump Station, and then there's a pump station that is on Penny Lane, which serves the water plant as well as BED building and anything that would happen at Moran. And I guess the Coast Guard Station. So those are the ones that have been identified. We just need money to get it to final design.
Good. Floor is open for questions or motion. That's right.
I'm happy to move that we take the recommended action 4.3 as listed.
Very good. Second by Councilor Barlow. Discussion, questions? Go ahead, Councilor Day.
Step 2 loans and step 1 loans, what are the differences?
Step 1 is they're usually reserved for planning or preliminary engineering. And those are at 0% interest. And then step 2 is really for the final design phase, that next design phase to get you to bid documents. And then the step 3. And the thing to remember with these loans is oftentimes the step 1 and step 2, if they are headed towards construction, they don't go into repayment on their own. It waits until you go to construction, and then those previous costs get rolled into the construction cost. And that all moves forward with as a 2% admin cost.
Maybe not for today, but the 30 millions of the voters authorized, do they have any clarification?
Yes, so the reservoir project, the drinking water reservoir, and the lead service line, that is not leveraging the 30 million or even our previous water bond. That is truly in an interim stage where when we go to build the reservoir project, we will have to include those costs in our ask to the voters. The pump station, the wastewater pump station one, we're a little bit on the fence. It may be able to use some of the money from the voters, or it may have to go on a future ask. Right now, we're in a stage where we're kind of reserving the remaining amounts of our $30 million bond or voter authorization to make sure we have money for the first phase of upgrades at the plants. Once we see what those costs are, we may be able to then take the remaining money and pick off 1 or 2 of these pump stations, but otherwise those would go on a future ask.
So basically, let's expect another public request.
We are actively preparing for what that looks like, yes.
And are hoping for November 2024, so timeline just for what, just, you know. How much? Depends on what we bring forward, whether it will include the full weight of the wastewater plant upgrades along with these pump stations. There will be an interest in both a water and a wastewater request. We're working with Two on some of those early conversations to kind of guide what those asks will be.
Any further questions? You have a motion, a second motion on the floor, so if there's no further questions, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Soon.
And great, that brings us to airport item number 4, airport equipment purchase for $100,000. This is the Toro Groundsmaster 910D Rotary. Got it. Take it away, Nick. Welcome. It's been a while. I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a little while. Pretty, well, I should say a relatively simple request. We have an almost 17-year-old lawnmower. This is not your typical lawnmower. This goes out on our airfield that does hundreds of acres. We're required to keep that to a certain length. And this is a 16-foot wide, very large mower that is pretty much used every single day to keep those minimums. Today's request is to replace our 17-year-old one with a new one, better emissions, better engines, newer equipment, and happier employees.
Great. Questions? Great for motion.
I will move to the item as read and take the actions as we keep. Look good moment on.
We have a second. Second by Councilor Jang, discussion.
Yes, was just wondering what you're doing with the old one.
Right now, we're probably gonna keep it in our inventory just to make sure. There is a long lead time, almost a year lead time on this mod. So we're not gonna make it this season with this new one. We're gonna keep the old one in our inventory just in case, and then we'll probably sell it.
So in other words, you're saying that you won't have this for the summer of 20,
We will not.
this will be the summer of 20.
That will start using it, yeah, because we'll probably get delivery in November, December of next year.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
That's a quick turnaround on some of our big equipment. So,
In what?
yes.
Second,
Yes.
we have first, so go for the discussion, we'll go to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to the second airport item, which is request to execute a 2023 ARPA Clean Water Fund MS4 grant agreement.
I think there's,
Let's skip over. Oh, I'm sorry.
The 4 of them.
Sorry. Request to purchase 2 Ford, this is exciting. It's 3 electric vehicles. And it's like a neutral amendment. 2 Ford F-150 Lightnings and a Mach vehicle.
yeah, so very exciting. I have Dave Carmen, Deputy Director, on the line, as well as Marie and Larry here. This is the first time that we're purchasing electric vehicles for the airport, 3 of them, 2 Lightnings and a Mach-E, all 4. These are replacing very older units, fuel powered units. This is also going to be one of the first operational electric vehicles on an airport. in New England. One of these vehicles will be one of the vehicles that are gonna be used by Dave's department, which is our operations team, inspecting our runways on a daily basis, using no fuel, which is absolutely amazing. We also have some internal policies that any off airport runs or missions to go on, that they will all be with electric powered vehicles, so we won't be using any gas powered vehicles to leave. We do budget annually for these types of sustainability missions. This is of course a capital program, so we also need a small budget amendment to make sure that these three are operational. We were looking at a 12-month lead time for them, but however, this bidder, and I forgot the name of the bidder, but
Moyle Valley Forge.
the Moyle Valley has them on site in stock, and they're literally ready to be delivered tomorrow, which will prove it tonight at City Council.
Wonderful.
Thank you. So I'm happy to make the motion as recommended on board. Yeah, as recommended on Civic Clerk. I can't break the habit. I do have one question. Hold on for a second.
Okay, second, I think that's what Jenny, back to you.
Thanks. So when you put out an RFP, you got 3 responses. And there are more than 3 dealers that sell these cars. So did they just didn't respond?
They didn't respond. We also proactively tried to reach out to as many dealers as possible. A big part of it, just like the disqualifying bid, was the time for delivery. We had a less than 12-month period of time to deliver these. Obviously sooner the better. We also tried to use state bid funding for these as well, which would have been much better pricing, but nobody's accepting state bids right now because the retail prices, the demand for retail is much higher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just given the fact that there's a $11,000 difference between 2, just have to wonder if there have been more bids, maybe. I don't know, but that would be the only thing that I would wonder, because when it all boils down to it, there really were 2 bids.
That's right.
So that was unfortunate.
And I mean, the good part is this is going to be one of many more to come as we transition our whole fleet into electric here as much as we possibly can.
Great.
Any further discussion, questions? Yeah,
So it seems now the airport logo has changed the colors a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, and will you be customizing the new vehicles and the old ones as well? Do you use this?
We are, yep. So if you'll start seeing that on our current fleet, we've already transitioned probably 4 vehicles or so. These 3 are already designed with our new logos. The Mach-E is mostly going to be used on the public side of the fence, so it's going to have a little bit more of an extravagant design on the side of the vehicle. But yes, these will have it.
Okay. Go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we get to item I was jumping at before item number 6, which is the request to execute a 2023 ARPA Clean Water Fund MS4.
I'm going to hand it right over to Larry, the Director of Planning, Engineering, Sustainability.
The nice story about this is we hired a summer intern and we gave her 3 or 4 challenges before she started this summer. She did all those tasks and also found us $500,000 on top of that. We're giving the state, our consultants, and a little guidance from us. So she got this done. So we're hoping she comes back. So anyway, so this is ARPA was federal and state funds, which we also have to match with 20% to improve our stormwater systems. We have over 600 structures on the airport. 80 of them through our annual inspections need work, so that'll be part of it. another part of it is we're looking to move to a recycling our glycol rather than just being disposed of. So this will take us the first step to study that, to evaluate where we can do it, what we can do, and minimize the footprint of the area to minimize the intake of water, and then extracting the stronger glycol to recycle. So those are the big things.
And just for reference, glycol is what's sprayed onto the aircraft.
Propane.
Propane.
Questions? Discussion? Motion?
So I'll make that motion as recommended.
You, second by Councilor McGee. Any further discussion? We'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Sorry there as well.
Sure, so you all may or may not recall, as part of the FY 24 budget, we had brought forward a number of positions that were based on the recommendation of our consultant, Raf Tellis, for some gaps that needed to be filled within our organization. These are two of them. There are still two more remaining. The one is a new position for us, the Water Resources Utility Inspector / Coordinator. This is sort of the best corollary is the excavation inspector that works within the other parts of DPW. This position really has two main things, which is when people are building things in, around, next to our infrastructure, that person making sure that they know what the infrastructure is and that it's being protected appropriately. Time and time again, we go to fix a water main break and there's a gas line on top of it, or a electric conduit or something that makes our job, which is already hard, much harder. And we think these things could be avoided in the future. The other piece is really that mapping piece. We lost that function within our organization a long time ago, and trying to bring back a person who, together with the GIS specialist, can, when things don't match with the maps in the field, somebody who runs that to ground figures it out and then updates the darn maps once and for all. A great example today was a project that bored through the top of our ravine sewer. Unfortunately, it's not as bad as I was initially envisioning, but it would have been great that a position like this would have known that those borings were going in around very sensitive infrastructure, and could have been there to protect and make sure we had run everything to ground as far as every possible mapping. Certainly the project had tried to do its due diligence, but the stuff is 26 feet down. You don't always know where it is, and we just need to be as careful as possible. So that's the main function of that role. One other piece, and this kind of pertains to both of them, with the desire in the state, within the city, for additional housing and growth. There are going to be there's going to be a lot of pressure put on organizations like ours to keep up with and to review and to make sure that people are connecting to our system in a way that has been reviewed fully and completely and technically. And both of these roles will help hopefully add some capacity to our organization to be able to do that. And it is still my dream that we would be able to access parts of state statute which allow for delegated authority. So instead of developers or property owners having to go to the state as well as to us for review, just come to us, pay us the fees, let us do the very comprehensive review that we're already doing in some cases. Still a little ways off, but trying to build a different mousetrap so that we could be prepared to do that. But we do need people in-house. So that was the utility inspector. And then the other one is the stormwater field specialist. So right now we have one stormwater program manager, James Sherrard. We have a very large stormwater system, trying to keep up with all of it. Trying to keep up with all of the requests from the public is, very hard job. And we're trying to add capacity to that program, both for project review, for compliance inspections. If we're going to ask people to build things, we need to have somebody who's following up and making sure that those things are being built appropriately. And so this is another position that we're bringing forward to kind of fill some gaps in our regulatory programs. Both of these positions were included as part of the FY 24 budget. So this is not additional money that you have not already approved.
Sort of. Questions, discussion?
Happy to make the motions recommended.
Excellent. We have a second by Councilor Barlow. Discussion. That's good.
But I will have some concerns if this was not an enterprise fund. But I mean, put that perspective of this. So it's time to use all these positions and classifications. So I what I'm saying. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Right. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Brings us to item number 8.
Thank you, HR.
Thank you.
Classification of one clerk treasurer.
Yes, this one is mine. Councilor Jang mentioned, and as I have mentioned before, and will again in a minute, talking about FY 25. We are doing everything we can in the general fund to reduce the number of reclassifications as well as new positions that we're bringing to this board because of budgetary pressures. I am bringing this reclassification because of kind of an internal equity issue. Everyone here knows that we have gone through some times of transition in this clerk treasurer's office. As a result of that, we've been in flux with some of our positions, and we had 2 senior accountant positions, both reporting to our controller, and one was focused on grants and one was focused on capital. We also had another position that had very similar duties that was reporting up to our assistant director of finance. And that employee asked HR to look at their job description because in fact, they're doing the exact same work as the senior accountant, but they had a different grade. And so when HR looked at those, looked at the job descriptions, they realized that all 3 senior accountants should be at the same grade, and we had 2 at 1 grade and a 3rd at a lower grade. And so this keeps the 2 senior accountants at a grade 18 and brings the 3rd up to that same grade. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Questions, discussion, let's have a motion. Paul,
I'll make the motion as recommended.
thank you. Second by Councilor McGee. Seeing no more hands, we vote let's get.
For discussion. Yeah. Will this be retroactive? Right?
No.
But you explain the sense. Okay.
Go to a vote then. You all left. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Excellent. Final deliberative, final item for resignation and approval, the reclassification of 2 BCA positions. Welcome, Doreen.
Thank you.
And what give that for us?
Sure. We have spent probably the last year thinking about doing a complete reorg within the department, looking at some of the pressures that our team faces where there's tremendous compression. And we need to, as an organization, we have grown significantly over the years. And we were going to wait until a year later. And when I began dealing with the HR department as well as clerk treasurers, we realized that these positions really were inequitable across the city. And people were being asked to do work that was significantly paid. And of course, increasing and reclassification or increase of anything in our budget, 90% of the time means that we have to raise more money. We're very cautious about that in this environment. And so we're slow to act, and yet it's an equity issue. So I think the description here, I don't want to repeat it for you unless you have questions about these two positions. I think you know both of the positions quite well and their responsibilities and significant increase in work over the years and through COVID. And we're going to take our time, but we will do that full reorg over the next year. And probably put together a schedule, because we won't be able to create, we won't be able to resolve all of the inequity in 1 year. We understand that. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Floor is open for discussion, questions, motion. That's right.
I'm happy to make the motion as recommended.
That's what you your second. Second by President Paul, thank you. Further discussion.
I would just simply add that I faithfully doing that it's necessary to do retroactively. So it's $9,400. It's two, that goes back to the, yeah.
In the further discussion.
Yep, I mean,
But
I think, you know, sometimes it's important to understand the scope of work when the position and their title are similar between different departments. And I think also the retroactive year pay here is a big issue for me. And from my perspective, we should freeze starting today, and these items will not be getting support. I also would request, so for example, as we move forward, each department is tied to a specific city council committee, so that we add that as part of the checklist. Discuss these before it goes to board. Would be very important.
I think that would be a pretty big change, Mr. Jennings, to our, this is for financial, our system. As far as I've been involved, has been that, you know, this should be something that would be dealt with by the Board of Finance, not by other committees. We already put a lot of pressure on our departments, department administrators to manage decisions that, you know, we could have a separate discussion about that'd be a pretty big process change. So I guess I think we'd have to talk that through and have would be one idea. Reluctantly, but you know, maybe it could be convinced that it's some sort of separate process. So I just don't want to make you think I ignored that. I just think it's a major change that we're have to go through some effort to get to an agreement there. Any further discussion of the business before us?
I'll just comment on this. I know this is something we do sort of normally, and we have been, so I'll be supporting this tonight, but I also sort of have some issues with the retroactive pay that we don't see, not only in these two reclassifications, but we've seen them in others that have come before us. And given where we are financially, and we're going to hear about momentarily, I think this is something that going forward that we really should start being like doing less of the retroactive pay. So I'll just say that. So I have that discomfort as well, but I'm going to be supporting this.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And same thing is opposed. And at the end passes 4-1. Thank you. Maureen.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
And so that concludes the section 4 of the agenda. So this now brings us to section 5, and we did almost meet our goal. We have 20 minutes for we'll do upstairs for a FY25 general fund budget update. I'll just, as Catherine's getting this up here, just bring things up. Just, I know the board is pretty well engaged in this issue. Doesn't need a lot of framing, but maybe people buy things at home. The FY24 budget, the budget that we're in, was an exceedingly challenging budget to complete. And even as we completed it, we knew that the FY25 budget would be even more difficult. We committed, we were aware of that and made commitments during the last budget process to do proactive work at a level that I think exceeds anything that I've been involved with for the past to try to develop all concepts we could for addressing that challenge. In addition to tax increases, we have felt, and have been pretty clear, we have not had a general fund tax increase since vote improved increase since FY20. Our costs go up every year, and as we talked many times in the past, inflation is very challenging for the city budget to address without some kind of rate increase. We've had very high inflation since that last FY20 increase, so I think it's unrealistic to think we can get through this inflationary period without some kind of property tax adjustment, but we want to minimize that as much as possible. So what you're going to see in the presentation tonight is really follow-up on these numerous different fronts that we had committed to looking into, and an assessment and projection of sort of where we are and what's not done. We are in a position to make some estimates about where we are, where we're going to end up, and what that means for what the implications of that are for the year and possible tax increase decisions. We're approaching that time of year. It gets come upon us quickly when we have to make a decision whether or not to have a tax increase on the town meeting day ballot. Really have till the end of January to make that decision. So this is an important update tonight, and will be followed up with when we come back from the holiday break. This will be a focus for our further discussions in January. So anything else you want me to hit before I head over? Take it from here. Okay, great.
I'll just open by saying this presentation was originally twice as long because it had a part 2. And that was an update on all of the non-property tax related initiatives that we started working on. That is now item 3.3, and it's just a separate presentation that's under the consent agenda because we don't have time to go through it tonight. So I encourage you to take a look at that as well, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Tonight on the budget, just a little bit of context, since the last time we talked about this was in September. As the mayor mentioned, this current year's budget used $4.5 million of one-time money. And we know that we do not want to replace all of that with property tax revenue because that would increase taxes by more than 8 cents or over 10%. We also, in September had estimated, our budget hole at about $7 million out of our $101 million general fund budget. That was a bit of a ballpark. A little bit more detail on the use of that one-time money. You can see how we used it in those bullets. And the bottom line is 4 million of that 4.5 million of one-time revenue does need to be replaced to ensure that the city can continue to provide essential services. 500,000 of it was for COVID related services, and we won't need to replace it at this time. In addition to the $4 million, we do have increased personnel costs for this coming year. You can see in the red arrow, the current estimate is $3.4 million for those. That estimate is based on this year's current staffing level. You can see it includes a pretty high level of attrition that every general fund department was handed by me to ensure that the budget balanced. It does include all of the COLAs that we have negotiated and our best guess on projected increase for benefits. The two benefits that cost us the most as a city are retirement and health insurance. And of course, we're only about halfway through this fiscal year. So I note that we expect to have updated information in April, but we're using the best information we have at this point. So in addition to those two items, I have one more slide worth of additional costs. And I forgot to add the word public, but these are additional FY25 public safety requests. They total $1.6 million. And you can see there's requests for both fire and police. And they are a mix of staffing and operational support. It includes, for the fire, reducing attrition to realistic levels, and for the police, increasing staffing according to our rebuilding plan and restoring overtime. All of those get us to this chart, which is our current hole. The 4 million of one-time money, the tentative increase in general fund salaries and benefits, the public safety costs. And please note this note at the bottom that we do expect these numbers to change. We have not done all of our deep dive consultation with department heads. But again, we feel like it's important to have this discussion with you and to give you all of the information as we have it, and to just be clear about what we know and what we don't know. So facing a $9 million hole, what are our plans to fill that hole? This is probably our most important slide. As you can see in rows A and B, A is an increase in property tax revenue, and it says via the grand list growth. This means, this is what I like to call kind of organic growth. This is growth that happens regardless of what we do with the tax rate, and it's an increase in tax revenue that we see because of all the new development happening around town. Row B is an increase in gross receipts, local option tax, and franchise fees. And I have estimated this based on the past 10 to 15 years of historical performance. And so that gets us to about $900,000 of our whole. Row C is you may recall one of the revenue sources, important revenue sources for the general fund is about $13 million of what we call user fees. And those are fees that people pay to use certain services like to use the marina, the campground, to take a class at BCA or through the Parks Department. And so we have just received proposals from several different firms to conduct a user fee analysis for us to make sure that we are charging enough to cover our costs. And so we anticipate that we will be able to raise about $1.3 million at the end of that study. Row D is another initiative that we're working on, and that is the operational efficiency analysis. And this body approved a contract with a consultant at its last meeting. And we are starting to work with the consultant and are expecting to decrease our general fund expenses by at least 2%, saving at least $2 million. Those C and D are really important because that is how the city itself is going to kind of contribute in terms of filling this hole. As you can see, there's a lot of different ways we're going to need to kind of all chip in to reach this $9 million. And we understand it's critical. That doesn't all happen on the backs of taxpayers. That said, row E, we are proposing an increase of 5 cents to the public safety tax, and I'll come back to that. That would raise $2.8 million. Row F, we are considering some other kinds of increases to taxes that could raise up to $1 million. And then there's row G, the still to find $1 million. Following up on the public safety tax and how we arrived at our recommendation of 5 cents. The FY24 public safety budget, which I am defining as the police budget plus the fire budget, is about $34 million, 19 million from police and 15 million from fire. The public safety tax only raises $4.4 million. Our general city tax, which should cover that should pay for many different items, brings in about 11 million. But let's pretend that if we could put all of that to public safety, then combining the public safety tax and the general city tax, you're still, with those two sources, only able to fund 45% of our public safety budget. So there's 55% that's coming from non-property tax revenue sources, and that is the pressure that we're feeling and why we've had to use one-time sources for public safety. And I'm sure we have a lot to discuss, and we have 8 minutes to do it. So I am happy to take your questions, engage in discussion.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for all the work that underlies that. So yes, let's floor is open for questions, comments at this point. It's not a conversation we're ending tonight, but it is. We're approaching key milestones in January, so floor is open.
Yes, the road G, I think it was, the 1 million still defined. What efforts are being undertaken to find it? Are you giving directives to department heads to find that? Or even to find?
Start with that.
So, I mean, as I forget, Councilor Barlow, this is how many years you've been on the Board of Finance?
My third budget.
Third budget. So, I mean, as you know, there's a fair amount of variability in municipal budgets up until June, and especially I would say in the pandemic, post-pandemic years, there's been a fair amount of volatility in a variety of ways. And so, it would certainly not be unusual at this point in the budget process to still be sorting, refining, sorting through projections, sorting through details about are likely to, things can break against us from here to the end, but things often can break for us. And this is, so we don't know exactly where that's come from. Certainly the department heads are well aware of the challenge we face. They've been engaged through last year's process and this year's process. We give frequent updates to the department head team, which meets twice a month. Catherine's given a couple of recent budget updates, and people are very much aware that it's going to be very well. First of all, that they need to engage this operational analysis, and that we are counting on them to be fully engaged in that process and supportive, collaborative. Also, that we're not in an environment where new general fund positions can really be entertained short of some really pressing urgent issue. But also that after this period where I think we needed to be leaning into reclassifications given the inflationary environment, what challenges that we were facing since the pandemic, that period is over to the grade, as you guys have kind of weighed in tonight in several ways that we are seeking to avoid that as much as possible. What else? You want to add anything, Catherine, in terms of department direction?
No, I think you bring up a key point, Councilor Barlow, and I think in some years we have given multiple direction to department heads, like give us a level funded budget plus a cut budget, and that may be part of our strategy this year too. So we can have some different options to play with.
Councilor McGee.
Thank you, Catherine, for getting this to us early so that self and the public have an opportunity to digest what's possible and kind of I don't want to say a worst case scenario, but give people time to anticipate any significant changes to the budget. And so this assumes that outside of the public safety departments, that all of the departments will be level funded.
Yes.
I was glad to see the mental health services listed under the expenses for the fire department. So it's essential that we're providing mental health services that are tailored to first responders, to both fire and police. And so I guess my second part of that question is, are those mental health services something that already exists for the police department? And if that's not a question that can be answered this evening.
No, the police have had mental health services in excess of the fire departments for many years. In recent years, we've sort of started to catch up a little bit with the fire department.
That was my
That's great.
Yeah, I'll start with a comment by saying, Catherine, thank you. And I think personally, you meet with all of us personally before today. I appreciate that very much. And two, in terms of comment, I don't know if people are aware of what we're discussing here. $9 million budget hole is significant. And I just don't want us to minimize it because this is scary, telling the truth. Yes, normally we should have figures of color, increase of paid for employees, all of it I understand. But I don't understand whether or not the public safety increases are tied to the bargaining we had, or elements of it are only tied.
So I have included everything that was bargained in there, and the kind of extra requests are
1.6 million.
The 1.6 million. In some cases goes beyond, because they're not always things that were bargained, things like. How much we spend on equipment or how much the supplies for the fire marshal get isn't necessarily covered by contract, so. I think in many cases. I would say it is necessary for public safety, but beyond the scope of the contract.
So basically, we could reject that. Just say because it
Yes.
seems disappointed by request to the taxpayers of funds.
Yes.
I have an issue with that, and from my perspective, it's but I don't know also, since it's what they see out in the on the commercial, please hiring from now to adjournments, we need a city council resolution to please both hiring and also reclassifications.
I don't have the exact answer to that, Councilor Ding, but I'm happy to look into it and get back to you. Yeah.
For now, again, I'm so glad that we're discussing this right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Day. We have been. I guess we haven't quite said it tonight, but it should have been in the answer of like what kind of direction we've given. Kind of almost said it before, but that we've been operating really for several months now under sort of a soft hiring freeze already, and that's been communicated to departments. So not a draconian one, not an absolutely firm one, but certainly one where before positions are being filled with the firm. Your turn. I certainly, I agree with you, Councilor Jang, we should not in any way minimize the challenge of getting through, solving a $9 million problem. I do, think it's important to keep it in perspective. It is a 10%, even kind of fully defined that way is less than 10% of the overall budget challenge. I would say every year we probably go into part of the process looking at something, something approaching half of that. This is bigger than that, and it is going to require some pain, but I don't minimize it. It's not going to be easy, and I don't think it is crisis. I think this is something that we can work our way through with continued hard work. And some choices. It is certainly available to us to. There are some choices available to us, and we just are going to need to. Hopefully, starting the discussion now allows us to, as a board, which the council is looking to for leadership on these issues, hopefully come to some consensus over the next couple, 6 weeks or so, and then be able to communicate that consensus to our colleagues on the full council, and then hopefully that's our meeting.
Also want to note that several of us won't be here by the time this budget is actually voted on, so to the extent that we are hearing future council and mayor to take on these challenges.
Yes, absolutely. That is an added complication to this year, which I think we're doing the right things by trying to tee this up as much as possible for our successors, opposed to just in April. That's my intent with this at least, but it does add an additional dynamic that can be complicated. I recall a similar situation 12 years ago that can be politically complicated. So I think our best way through this is good communication, and hopefully tonight is a start on that. So thank you to Catherine for the advanced work. Thank you to Board of Finance members for putting in time outside of this session to start to understand this. Let's stay in touch over the next couple months. With that, I think we're due upstairs. So if there's no objection, here, I am going to adjourn the Board of Finance at 6:04 PM. Thank you.